Hello sanibonani babukeli, sesifikile thina lentandokazi yohlelo lenu Yilungelo Lakho. It's your right. Uyazi ke mbukeli, lolu uhlelo olulethela konke phela okuthinta wena la eNingizimu Afrika namalungelo akho njengomthengi. Lona ke mbukeli uMajali, uMangcolosi kaSjongo, ungangibiza uAlisha, ungangibiza uNhlanhla, those are my names. Mbukeli, elinye phela lamalungelo lenu ukuthi phela sifike emakhaya siphephile kulama holiday ezayo. Yes mbukeli, a trouble-free as well as safe journey is all we hope for when we are traveling to various destinations this festive season. Njengoba abaningi ke bethu mbukeli behamba ngamabhasi, amatekisi nezitimela, asibheke izinto ezingenziwa phela ukuthi sihlale siphephile kwindawo nendawo esiya kuzo. And to tell us more about what plans are currently in place in Mbukeli to ensure that we travel safely these holidays, let's welcome two lovely ladies, Usis Rebecca Phala from the Taxi Council, SANTACO, samukele nosis Dikeledi Walstroom, yena okhulumela inkampani yamabhasi Intercity Xpress. Ladies, a very good afternoon to both of you. Thank you so much for joining us. Welcome. Let's start with you, Sis Rebecca.
Sure, thanks so much. Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a bit about what the Taxi Council actually does when you call yourself SANTACO.
So the Taxi Council is the apex body that represents the interests of mini and meter taxis in South Africa. You think of the taxis that you see on the road, we have comprised them to fall under one organization, and it is led by people who are democratically elected on a 5-year term, and they essentially make sure that they ensure that the interests of the operators within this sector are looked after. That's just about it. Sure.
Okay, so you basically overseeing that current space. So we have a lot of complaints today. I'm sure you're going to deal with them, Sis Rebecca.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. All right. Sis Dikeledi, welcome. Tell us a bit about Intercity Xpress.
Thank you so much, Alicia. I'm happy to be here today. So basically, Intercity Express and Eagle Liner is a bus company that goes all over the country, namely KZN, Eastern Cape, and your Cape Town, Eastern Cape. Sorry.
Okay, go ahead.
So basically, we cater to people that are traveling long distance, taking them safely home, even students. When the schools close, the students come and utilize our bus services. So Intercity Express and Eagle Liner has been in operation for the past 18 years. And we're happy to be providing a good service to the passengers out there.
Thank you so much for that brief introduction, ladies. Sis Rebecca, I mean, we know, with taxis, there's always a myriad of problems, particularly around this time, the festive season time. Maybe talk to us before we get into the nitty-gritties about some of the things that are currently plaguing the industry. But what are some of the current plans that you have in place to ensure safe travels for all your passengers this festive season?
It's actually a continuation of what we do throughout the year, or at least what we seek to do.
If you can. Yes, you can go ahead.
So what we do really, we've got a flagship program, Sibiza Itlhokomela. And what we have there is operators who have been trained to work and complement what your traffic officers would usually do emgwaqweni. So what they do is, one, they ensure that before taxi ipuma from taxi rank, check, is it roadworthy, does it have all that is required? If it's a long distance trip, those are the people that will ensure that onkumuntu who's inside a taxi has enlisted their details and next of kin, so that by the time it leaves, we've sort of done all that we can in terms of taking a preventative measure. So that's the Tlokomela campaign. For the festive season, we heightened the work. Almost all of us will also leave offices, because some of us will be working largely in offices, to go and complement what's being done on the roads. But the biggest thing that we're asking from our commuters is that let it be a collaborative effort. So whilst nathi sizoyenza what we need to do, we also want them to sort of meet us halfway. For instance, the immediate thing that comes to mind is, let's reduce the luggages, right? So people will usually come with this big bags, and next thing you know, mouse at taxi, you can't even see what kwenzakalani ngaphandle.
Imagine.
It's one of the things, right? Abantu bahamba namagrocer from eGoli all the way to emakhaya.
Yes, and most taxis do not have carriages now about move. It's just you get in there with your single-handed luggage.
Absolutely, which then poses a huge threat to people's livelihoods. So iTlokomela looks at things like that to say, before itaxi iphume erenkeni, is it fine? Are people seated comfortably? Is it not overloaded? Isn't that? But the work is a lot more. I'm sure we'll talk about it as we expand to say what else are we doing. But for the festive season, we're just heightening that because it's something that we do on a continuous basis. And the understanding obviously also is that government comes to the fore. Also with their traffic officers, you'll see that there'll be a lot more on the roads, especially your national roads, the N1 and the likes. So we sort of work with them in that regard. We do some campaigns also on the roads to say, if a driver's tired, why not stop, get a stretch here and there before you proceed with the road? Because sometimes, you find that a person is just driving.
I was just about to ask about those fatigue drivers because most of the times cause my accident. So Dikeledi, I mean, in terms of buses, we know this has been an ongoing process where the details of the travelers are loaded onto the system, even when you're booking the bus. So what new things or systems have you implemented to try and enhance the traveler's experience as well and ensure his safety on top of that?
So basically, all our buses are fitted with cameras, and there is a tracker that is monitored 24/7. And we do have call centers that are there open, and our operations departments that are open 24/7. So anytime if a passenger has got a complaint, they are more than welcome to call in at the call center, and we'll help them
during the trip.
During the trip, at all times. Our numbers are on the ticket covers, on their tickets, as well as at the back of the buses. We have our numbers, and passengers are free to contact us at any time. And should there be a delay, we contact our passengers and inform them of a delay in advance so that at least they've got that time and then they don't have to wait for a bus to come at the stations.
Then Harimotu, at least they reporting a reckless driver during a trip. What actions are you then able to take as the owners of the entity?
Okay, so basically if a passenger would call in to complain about the driver's behavior or the speed, how the passenger, you see, so we are able to protect, number one, the passenger's identity. We will call the driver and inform the driver to say, look, we have been receiving a complaint or complaints from passengers on board the buses. Can you please reduce your speed, lower the aircon, or drive cautiously? And then we don't obviously disclose which passenger has informed us, you understand? So we do, and we'll also go back to the footage on the bus to check if the passenger was complaining that the driver was speeding. We'll check the speed limit to say, is the driver driving within the regulations of the speed limit, or is he driving recklessly? Is the driver falling off to sleep? We look at all those things. And a nice thing also that we've got on the buses, the tracking device, it's able to tell us if the driver is exceeding the speed limit, if the driver has stopped in an unauthorized stop, or he stopped for more than the duration that he's supposed to stop at a particular stop.
Awesome stuff. All right, Sis Rebecca, when are you getting to this level of attentiveness emateksini? But hold that thought. We're going to take a quick ad break. We are currently discussing road safety measures. This festive season, we're coming back shortly after this. Welcome back. How are we keeping the passengers safe on the roads njengoba niphuma nihamba niya emakhaya during this festive season. This is a pre-recorded show, Mbukeli, so unfortunately I can't take your calls, but you can interact with us on our social media platforms, that is Facebook as well as X. Alternatively, ungasendele email lapha ku consumer@sabc.co.za. I'm sitting with my two lovely ladies, Usis Rebecca Phala from Taxi Council SANTACO, alongside Usis Dikeledi Walstroom yenake uvela lapha ya Intercity Xpress. So I wanted to find out, Sis Rebecca, like when are taxis getting to this level of monitoring? Because we often hear ukuthi passengers after accidents, and this is a reactionary measure. After accidents, two driver or whatever, but nobody even had the means or access or the know-how. Who do you contact if a driver is either he looks like he's fatigued or rudagiwe or any of those things? Is SANTACO basically putting any plans afoot ukuthi nifike kuleyo level of monitoring?
Absolutely. Bengifuna ukuqala ngale ye speed limit for imoto zethu. I'm very happy, or also very happy as a sector really ukuthi ama car manufacturers, they are now meeting us halfway. Ama taxi wethu, a lot of them that are being brought in now, and a speed limitation already. Ayikwazi ukuthi idlule ku 100 kilometers per hour, which is proper because iyasiza. Ngikutshele earlier on ukuthi ama driver wethu, they have this temptation ukuthi because bafuna ukwenza i-commission, they speed, and sometimes that poses a threat, right? But ngendaba ye monitoring, ihlokomela le ngikhuluma ngayo has tried to do that, but inama limitations because ukhuluma nge-human resource, right? I-taxi industry, unfortunately, asikwazi to move at an ideal pace because we are self-sufficient. Ayikho isubsidy, azikho lezi zinto. So the resources are very tight. But be that as it may, kune collaboration esiyenzayo. For instance, kune association la eGauteng. It's called PRASA in Zwane. They already have a collaboration with a company that does taxi management systems. Le company le inama tracker akhulunywa usis Dikeledi. So they are able to give a report, and every operator really or a taxi owner is able to track imoto yakhe ukuthi ihambela kuphi, ihamba kanjani nezinto ezinjalo.
Okay.
So those are being explored, but at a very slow pace because ama taxi associations have to find it amongst themselves ukuthi bareze imali. Sometimes bazocela maybe operators to sicela sizana. So these things are happening.
But what is needed there, also Rebecca, because as I understand it, ama-taxi amaningi, they were against the sector being formalized in order to accrue wonke lama lokhuzana lama resources othi ayaleka manje.
That was before 2020. Uzokhumbula ukuthi ngo-2020 sibe ne-taxi lekhutla. SANTACO and all the other taxi formations, sahlala phansi nohulumeni, and we agreed actually to say sifuna ukuyi-formalize the taxi industry, sifuna ukuyi-corporatize. So what we also want to do is abo driver kumele babe formally employed, but that's probably a discussion that we might need to have on a different day. What is it? Will it actually look like? But the technology that's needed for you to be able to monitor, as usisi ekhuluma, it needs a lot of resources. We currently don't have that. But one of the things iphume from the Lohotla, from government, they said to us, formalize yourselves. Sizokwazi ukuthi siniphe i-subsidy, because manje how do you explain government giving money to an industry that's regarded to be unregulated?
That's the thing,
So that's one of the biggest things that we're doing tina as a council to compel our taxi associations in particular, which is where ama operators are sebenzela khona, to say let's do what we can so that government, then we can say to government, but what have you done? Because sisicalile ukusformalize. So the road for the taxi industry is a bit bumpy because of those conditions. So ama resources, they are thinly stretched.
Dikeledi, look, ama buses, we know ukuthi the travelers will obviously, I mean, it's ideal and recommended that you buy your ticket prior to you traveling. So, I mean, I've just brought my sister visiting for the holidays. She opted to use ibhasi, and you know, I know all the nitty-gritties, but for the benefit of our viewers, what should passengers bring uma eyobuka itikiti? What sort of documentation is needed mawuhamba uyobuka itikiti?
Okay. Ama-passenger mabayobuka ama-ticket, it's obviously advisable for them to book in advance. Bangameli ama-last minute ukuthi bazobuka ama-ticket ngoba amabhasi ayagcwala.
In advance, how far in advance? Are we looking at day, 24 hours, like 48 hours or a week?
As we speak right now, like buses are already pre-booked. People can book as back as October.
Are you
for
serious?
December.
Next year? Wow.
There's people that actually plan their trips in advance. So it's very advisable. Ngoba mawubuka in advance futhi at times ne price iyaphansi.
Absolutely.
You pay a cheaper price, unlike umuntu ozobhukha last minute. Because at the end of the day, when you book last minute, prices are competitive, prices will go up. So if passenger mayifuna ukuyobhukha ithikithi, they need to bring along their identification card, ID document, so that we can have the proper names put on the system. And if you're a pensioner, you also need to bring your pensioner card so that you can get the relevant discount.
Okay.
Because there's pensioners discounts, there's student discounts, even kids that are under the age of 3, they don't pay on a bus. They travel for free. So in order for you to show that or to prove that, it's ideal for you to bring along the birth certificate of the child so you can enjoy the benefits of the discounts.
Nina, you work differently when us as Rebecca, because I can just rock up a ranking, and which is, you know, it's actually efficient for most people.
Yeah.
But how safe is that? Ama details omuntu, the traveler, are only captured at the time when they're actually boarding. In next of kin, if anything happens in that regard.
So it's a big shortcoming. Sine inyi program that we're now pursuing. We're calling it a book a seat. So it's essentially what they've been doing with flights.
Okay, so you can book a seat prior.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do.
Nice.
We'll most likely start doing it next year, because we've also started seeing that they don't want to wait. The other thing that usually happens at taxi ranks is the queues, right?
Yes.
And sometimes I got a call, for instance, yesterday from a passenger who was saying, look, I'm frustrated. I've been here since the morning. I wanted to do a khan and you know, so those are some of the things that we're trying to curb. But the system as we have it now, you're good to utwalise. What usually happens is by the time you takes ham, the list is taken back to the office association. Ideally, they should make calls to all the people basi on the book to let them know, this, do you know this person? They're on a taxi from here to there. Okay. But again, there's that limitation of human resource to say, if you're at Noord, for example, you can imagine how big of a rank that is. So
yes.
How many calls are you able to make at a go? So that's why we want to embrace new technology to complement that.
Yeah. All right, very quickly, what if a passenger iyalahleka en route, like trip figure at a stop, wahamba waya toilet for a longer time, and then driver angene elokuzen either in the bus or the taxi ahambe? Let's start with you, Dikeledi. What happens in that instance?
Okay, in instances with the bus companies, when you get to a refreshment stop, the driver has to make an announcement to the passengers advising them what the duration of the break is, whether it's 20 minutes or 30 minutes.
So they can't go shopping for Christmas.
They are given that limit of 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And you see when it's peak periods, when it's busy, obviously it's congested. You get to Montrose, there's
the
20 other
packed.
buses.
Yes.
The toilets are packed.
The
they want to
shops,
buy
the
food.
refreshments,
Your
yes.
KFC, the queue is very long. You know, abantu bethu sithandela KFC,
much inyama nje.
so obviously everybody will be queuing a KFC. Ngapha ufuna ukuya endlini encane. So it becomes a problem. And if une problem mhlambe yesisu, you need to advise the driver ukuthi I've got a problem. Can you give me a few more minutes? So otherwise, after that 30 minutes, the driver does his head count. And if you are not there, they'll give you 5 minutes. But if you're not there, even after that 5 minutes, unfortunately, that bus has to go because there's 50 other passengers that need to be considered, that need to get to their destination.
Okay.
So on our side, if you do get left behind, you'll have to then give us a call at the call center and we can make arrangements for you to get the next available bus going in the same directions.
Awesome
and
stuff.
then we make arrangements for your luggage to be left behind at the office for safekeeping.
Manje ngizosala ngedwa aphansi. Yo. Mbukeli, you better make sure ukuthi you alert the driver uma ngabe wena you have some issues or special needs or kumele uzi communicate no driver so that they can accommodate you. We're talking about ukuthi usisiphepha kanjani on the roads in terms of ama-taxi and as well as ama-buses this festive season. Mbukeli, we're coming back shortly after this. Ungayindawo. Welcome back. We are talking safety emigwaqweni. Uma phela wena usebenzisa public transport, sikhuluma ngama-buses, sikhuluma ngawe amatekisi, sikhuluma ngawe ma-trains. We're going to be talking about that later on in the show. Ngihleli lana no Sis Rebecca Phala. She's from SANTACO alongside intokazi Sis Dikeledi Walstroom. Yenake, she is from Intercity Xpress. All right, so Sis Rebecca, I mean, let's talk about those special requests. Niyakwazi nini ukuthi if umuntu, say for example, I've seen it with buses, I've seen it with planes, ukuthi if minors are traveling alone, kuzoba nomuntu who's going to pay extra attention to labo bantwana abatravela bodwa, or if umuntu disabled, izinto ezinjalo, or if umuntu uyagula, as we were talking about it earlier on, ukuthi mhlawumbe ukhishwa isisu kumele amelwe endleleni. Are you able to accommodate such needs?
Oh, absolutely. It boils down to communicating prior, like Dikeledi said. I mean,
but I can't do that if I just rocked up at taxi rank, I broke my leg, ngifika nokhonkolo, sengifuna ukuthi ngitreatwe special, ngihlale phambili eTaxini.
No, you actually can.
Okay.
And that's the thing about the taxi industry, to say, as opposed to calling prior, ubatshele, this is what I'm dealing with. At Taxini, things happen instantly.
Okay.
When a woman comes and they're pregnant, we see her, we know this is where you take her.
Okay.
So that's the beauty that comes with the taxi industry. Because the industry abantu, umuntu ezo yambon, and they're able to say. So people have their children traveling all the time. You just need to make sure the driver knows, and the child gets to be looked after very, very well. And oftentimes, obviously, it'll be a bit different in that it's a taxi, so you'll find that they're just sitting with everybody. Sometimes they'll even identify an elderly person in the car. For instance, if it's a child, to say, just make sure that the child is okay. So that aspect of head counts also works even with fellow commuters, to say, you just check the person you were sitting with, are they back in the car, and things of that sort. So with the taxi industry, it happens, and it happens quite instantly.
Okay. Ongitshele ngalabantu abaphuza utshwala, abadla imphako during i-ride eTaxini, sekumele sinukojeqe babo ababaphake izolo. Kumele sidle nathi and be part of that smell elokuzeni. How do you then complain about such things, because they are happening in real time? Who do you approach? Do you approach the driver or the passengers themselves?
Ideally, the driver. So at Taxini Manhamba, the driver becomes the custodian of everyone.
Okay.
So the driver is the one that looks after everyone if you're lost directions and things of that sort. Ideally, if umuntu funa ukuphuza utshwala, it's very inconsiderate, right, to want to drink alcohol in the car. You know how our roads are. Next thing's shaya pothole, and then you pour your drink onto the next person, maybe even worse, right? So ideally, if umuntu efuna ukuphuza utshwala, we always ask, rather do it before maybe you get into the car. But sometimes people will say, no, ngifuna ukusiphuzela utshwala bami. And I mean, if you think about it, ideally, it's better that they do that in a public transport than if they're driving themselves and then they are drinking alcohol.
I suppose, yes.
So that's the kind of support that we give him. But the information is often to say, be considerate of the next passenger. Also because we are very close by, so it's a very tricky one. But usually we ask also for them not to overdo it, because sometimes uzothola ukuthi manifika.
Umkhuza kanjani umuntu esefika vele
you know, when you're at a taxi rank,
abalaleli labo bantu, we know this, Rebecca.
No, I hear you, but uyazama. You know, nothing beats being respectful when you speak to a person.
But can a driver bar umuntu embona ukuthi this one is highly intoxicated? Yes. There's just no way he's going to actually make this trip.
They can.
Okay.
They do that. But those Tlokomela people that I spoke to you about, because they're also on the roads. Sometimes if a driver feels like it's too much, they can even stop at a particular area and ask them to intervene, or even call them on the way to say, please come and intervene. And in such instances, that person can even be taken into that patrol car instead. Okay. Because the thing is, whilst you want to accommodate everyone, you also don't want to inconvenience the other passengers.
That's the thing, yeah.
And it's very sticky nonetheless. Very, very sticky.
Abantu bazojabula ukuthi uLokhuza uSis Rebecca at least is not saying it's banned, you can't drink while you are on eLokhuzeni eTaxi. Dikeledi, I mean, there's instances where a person is going to, say, Park Station, uyobhuka itikiti, and kunalabantu abathi no, ungabhuka itikiti through the various service providers, zamalokhuzana, zama-bus services, but uzothi no, let's rather ufagu petroli uhambe nami. Are you guys aware of that? Is that even allowed? And what are the safety measures around such abantu?
That is happening quite a lot, especially during the busy periods.
Is it permissible though?
No, it's not. It's in places like Park Station, Joburg Park Station, PRASA security has been put there to make sure that those touters, so we call them, are not seen in front of the officers. because it's very dangerous, and they pull people away from your
That's the
offices
thing.
and convince them to use their own private
And
transport.
these are strangers, by the way.
Yes.
Imagine umuntu ezothi angizohamba naye. I've never met you from a bar of soap.
Yes.
Sengiyongena emotweni yakho.
And they do take advantage, especially of elderly people or people that they see that they're a bit lost, they're unfamiliar with the area. So they do sometimes take advantage of those people. And if, for example, we're charging 800 rand, that person will say, no, we'll charge you 400 rand. Obviously, we are tied up for cash, so that person will want to take the cheapest way home. So it's very dangerous, and I'd really caution our passengers not to take that route, because you don't even know whether that person that you'll be traveling with is intoxicated, their vehicle is roadworthy, all those things. So it's quite a big problem.
Sis Rebecca, I mean, in terms of Amadex, what should then travelers be cautious of, be aware of, especially when they're traveling a long distance? And what are some of the precautionary measures abangayithatha to ensure ukuthi bafika lapho phambili be safe?
One of the biggest things is abantu sicela bagibele at taxi ranks, especially for long distances. You can't just get a taxi at a place that would ideally be for local taxis, and then you're thinking it's taking you for a long distance. But also, all our taxis have stickers, and the stickers will usually be an abbreviation of an association, and sometimes it can be a SANTACO sticker or something of that sort. It's always important for commuters to look out for that. It's also important, a lot of people like using social media now, Dikeledi, to take details of vehicles. Do that. If it means before you get into a car, you can just write to a loved one to say, this is the taxi I'm taking, this is the time that I left. It always works for you to be comfortable. But the biggest other thing is commuters need to budget, because one of the things that people would use starters, or in our case they would hitchhike, is because people like to cut corners, and that unfortunately is a big problem, because people get abducted. A lot of things are happening. It's just a huge safety concern for us. So the other thing that taxi associations do, especially around the early times of the year, is if you're short, you can actually speak to them to say, look, ngishota nge-10 rand, ngicela ningisize. But we also say that people must just learn to be savvy and budget your trips well in time, even if you're going to have a good time during the festive season. But know that this is my transport money.
Yes.
So that also you don't abuse that sense of kindness that comes from an association when they say, no, we can meet you halfway. But the biggest thing is, if we can, people must just avoid hitchhiking in its entirety. It's concerning. Yeah.
Look, I want to find out, when parcels get lost in both a taxi, I've never heard about the taxi one, I've never heard about the bus one, I know about the plane one. So maybe, ladies, if you can enlighten us there, what is the process of ensuring ukuthi I locate my bag, nokuthi ifika kanjani mina, and also do I have to pay then ukuthi ibag yami izifike kumina? Let's start with you, Dikeledi.
Okay, when a passenger boards the bus,
Yeah.
basically a passenger is allowed a certain amount of free luggage,
Yes.
which in our case would be 25 kgs for free. So when you check in, you are given a luggage sticker on your bag, and the smaller sticker gets put on your ticket.
Yes.
So when you disembark at any particular stop, you have to obviously produce that luggage sticker so that the driver can give you your luggage. In instances whereby bags get missing or bags are switched, which happens in some instances, or sometimes when you get to a particular place,
certain passengers are getting
Amapara,
off.
you see, or,
yeah.
yes, they sometimes do open luggage compartments and steal passengers' luggage.
Amapara,
Yes, you do
Dikeledi.
get that at some points, you understand?
Why
So-
ngalokhiwe i-luggage compartment?
They have ways of doing it. Sometimes they come with an iron rod and, back against the e-boot. So in
Bashida
instances
labantu.
like that, when passengers' luggage gets misplaced,
Yeah.
so we then try from the call center side to locate the passenger's bag. Obviously, the passenger will have to give us the description of the bag. SMSs are sent out to a particular service to say, look, if you've taken a bag by mistake or whatever, please let us know. And in most cases, passengers do get back to us to say, look, I've got a bag that is not mine, and we swap bags,
Okay.
and then we try and get the bag to the passenger. Obviously, because we've got offices all over the country, we'll get it to the nearest office.
Oh, so
And we
umuntu
don't charge the
uzoyilanda and you
passenger.
don't
Yes,
charge the
yes,
person.
the passenger is able to fetch their bag at the nearest ticket office. And you see,
Okay.
we advise passengers, especially traveling, don't put things, valuable items in the bag, in
I
the
wanted
luggage
to find
compartment.
out, yeah.
A laptop, a cell phone, jewelry, money, you sometimes get people claiming for saying that they had 10,000 rand in their bags, and you put that in the luggage compartment. So we really ask our passengers not to do that. Anything that is of value to you, try and keep it with you in the
All
bus.
right.
When you disembark halfway, go with your valuables.
All right.
Yes.
Ngezobabukela ubucwebe nezimali nama-wallet. No. Ungayifaki lapha ngoba kuthiwa amaphara ngathi busy now afuna kahle izinto lapha ezikhwameni zenu. We're taking a quick ad break. We're back shortly after this. Ungayindawo. Welcome back. We're still discussing izindlela phela zokuphepha emigaqweni mangabe usebenzisa itaxi, isitimela noma amabhasi. Let's also extend a very thank you to our previous guest Dikeledi Walstroom ovela Intercity Xpress. Usashile ke manje wavulela isikhundla insizwa lapha Sipho Zwane ovela PRASA ngoba ke mbukeli sithe ake siza ukuthi wonke ama modes of ama public transport siza ukuthi nina nifila kanjani uma nikona nsizwa. Welcome to the show. Happy festive season. Thank you for joining us. Look,
thank you for having me.
But Sipho, I mean, there's been a lot of issues around PRASA. Maybe let's start, I'm sure you've been following the conversation. Let's start by asking you, Uguti, senguphi manje in resolving some of the issues le Uguti abagibeli bebe complaina ngazo, itimela zikho in most places, itimela ifika late, ubugebengu phakathi kwetimela. How far are you in addressing those issues?
Siyabonga Sisihlanhla. Umsebenzi mkhulu laphana kwaPRASA. We have lost a lot of our infrastructure.
Absolutely, yes.
Around in 2020, you would recall Masigu hard lockdown. That is where we lost our signaling cables, your overhead cables. Ogona ma cable ayenza ukuthi isitimela sikhona ukuthi
sihambe. But Sipho bayintshontshile ngibonile bebakhe ngisho imkhukhu eCape Town on top of the railway tracks.
Bazintshontsile Sisihlanhla. So we do have programs in place njengamanje rebuilder okanye ukwakha umzila so that itimela zikwazi ukuthi ziphinde zihambe futhi. But ke uPRASA uhlukane kabili. Kuno metro rail okuyena odila ngama commuter day to day commuting. Kube khona mainline passenger service. Ebesimazi njengoshosholoza. Itimela ke zakashosholoza zisuka eJohannesburg eGoli zihambe zendaweni ezehlukahlukene. Sinesitimela esiya eQueenstown in the Eastern Cape.
Long distances,
long
basically,
distance, yes. Sinesitimela esisuka eJohannesburg esiya eMosina. As part of the program of rebuilding, sifuna ukubuyisa umzila waseThekwini ozosuka eGoli kuzoba isitimela leso sosuka eGoli siye eThekwini. Kube khona isitimela esosuka eGoli esizobhekisa eCape Town. Uma ngabe konke kuhamba kahle sinethemba ukuthi zizoqala ukurana around December. But definitely we can confirm ukuthi iMosina neQueenstown they are running. Ama booking services avuliwe for abagibeli. Siyanxusa ke ukuthi abagibeli babhuke isikhathi sisekhona. I-demand inkulu. Njoba sazi ukuthi abantu baseGoli ngokusebenza kodwa makufika lesikhathi sika Christmas bafuna ukuhamba baye emakhaya. Lapho khona bayospend isikhathi nemindeni yabo. Ingakho sibacela ukuthi sicela ukuthi babhuke isikhathi sisekhona ukwenzela ukuthi bazosithola ispace esitimeleni.
Awesome stuff. That is great news coming from PRASA because siyazi mbukela ukuthi abaningi bathi this is the most affordable form of public transport. So abaningi bese bekhala ukuthi awitimela isekho ezisisa from point A to point B. So what is coming from insizwa lapho Sipho Zwane is that kuyafixeka mbukeli, you can now expect ama services to be fully back and running. Uthi ngalo December ke sizombona sizombiza futhi next year sithi akazosinikeza i-report back. Welcome come back. We are talking safety emigwaqweni. Uma phela wena usebenzisa public transport, sikhuluma ngamabhasi, sikhuluma ngawe amatekisi, sikhuluma ngawe ma-trains. So now, Sis Rebecca, I mean, as a SANTACO, do you have integrated programs with ilokhuzana, with PRASA, whereby you are putting particularly passengers wenu first? Because we've seen, for instance, ukuthi ama-taxi, incidents where taxi drivers will stop your e-hailing services, or abafuna abantu bazovimba abantu uma beyitimeleni because bafuna kusetshenziswe imode yabo kuphela ye-transport. Do you have any integrated relationship and working programs in collaborator kuzona ukuthi nizame ukuthi also conscientize your drivers around that issue ukuthi people need to have a choice ukuthi umuntu uhamba ngani?
Well, before the hard lockdown, at which time as Amateksi and everybody else in the public transport sector, we were really hit hard.
Yes.
The reality of the matter is that public transport has always been integrated. So umuntu zogena estimeleni magehla So it's always been the reality that public transport is integrated like that. But uzokhumbula nayo baba uzokutshela ukuthi kube kwaba nenkinga. For instance, you'd have taxi ranks immediately operating just outside of the stations.
Yes.
But when things were not happening, most of the taxis also moved, but they are going back now as well because they are also seeing that there's a resumption of the services. And I would imagine that in December, once things are sort of back to normality, we will also go back to collaborate. So I don't necessarily think that we've ever had clashes, and I'm sure you can attest, Bab, with the trains in terms of fighting for commuters, with trains and even with buses.
It's always ama routes, I think, on land with other
Absolutely.
taxis, namabhasi.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that particular one is a conversation that can be had on a different day because
Absolutely.
it
We
talks
need
to
to have that
issues of
conversation.
absolutely
Yeah.
the reality of who really actually regulates how much public transport is available. And when you issue out these permits, do you look at that? Because otherwise there's too much that's happening on the ground and very little people that are using these services. Also because abantu sebane imoto zabo. So that causes a problem. So that's a discussion that we might have on a separate day. But I think in terms of istimela and the taxi industry, sebenzisana kahle kakhulu.
Balindana bayathelelana. But Sipho, I mean, let's talk about that. You spoke earlier about your booking services being back online. What services do you offer? Like kunama e-ticket, can I book online, or do I physically have to go a station la ngizobuka khona? And what happens if ngilahlekelwa ithikithi? Can I then go ngihambe sengifikile elokhuzeni esitimeleni ngisho ukuthi mhlambe ngilahlekelwe ithikithi? What is the recourse there?
Yeah. Ngiyabonga sisihlandla. Okwamanje we require the passengers to come to the station.
Okay.
Bazobhuka bakhone nokuthenga ithikithi. Kunama programs esisebenzela phe kwawo. Siyazi ukuthi abanye babagibeli bethu basendaweni ezisemakhaya.
Yes.
So we are trying to reach out ukuthi sebenzise abo service abafana nabo ShopRite, where they are able to purchase a ticket
nice.
From wherever they are. And that seeks to address indaba ukuthi bangaze bahambe ibanga elide ukuyothenga ithikithi, but bakhona ukulithenga eduze nalabo ahlala khona. Uma ngabe umgibeli elahlekelwa ithikithi emva kokuthi sekalitholile, uma bebhuka siba nama details wabo, siba negama, isibongo, ID number, cell phone number, and so on.
Okay, so all parts of the same documentation is
Yes.
required across the other
Correct.
forms of transport. Okay.
Yes. So we are then able to assist them by going into the system to see ukuthi indeed ubelithengile ithikithi,
Udonse reference number.
sithole reference number bese
Okay.
siyamnceda ukuthi agibele esitimeleni ahambe.
Okay, and then like should an unforeseen circumstance like i-accident yenzeka kwi-train, bathintwa kanjani ama next of kin or ama loved ones? Do you also have that system where you have ama next of kin details on ama lokhuzana amathikithini? Even those short journey ones, lawa from one point to from one town to the next town, like basically a 10-minute ride.
Yeah. Ake ngigxile kakhulu la ku mainline passenger service. Kubalekile ukuthi sibe nama details womgibeli noma abagibeli nabomndeni bakhe noma ama next of kin.
Okay.
So kubalekile futhi sisihlandla ukuthi ngisho ukuthi isitimela noma umzila lo esiusebenzayo uphephile kakhulu. We do not plan ukuba nengozi. Yebo siyazi ukuthi ingozi ziba khona. But it's important to say it's a highly regulated environment. sine program esinayo njengamanje si-introduceile recently kwa-PRASA esibiza u-asiphephe.
Okay.
Asiphephe sizama ukuthi sigweme ingozi zingabi khona. Bonke abasebenzi bethu babe focus, very high alert to make sure ukuthi asibi neingozi.
Okay.
So angifuni ukuthi ngigxile kakhulu indabeni zengozi. However, uma ngabe sekwenzekile sinazo indlela zokuthi sithinte yes, imndeni.
Okay. All right. And because we're almost out of time, very quickly, Sis Rebecca, I mean, to wrap this up, I mean, what would you advise ama travelers who's going to be using wonke la mamotse kade sikhuluma ngawo e-transport this festive season?
If you're on medication, make sure that you've got your medication. Make sure that you're checked out, especially before you travel for a long distance. And people must budget. That budget issue is very, very important. And also alert a loved one also before you get on public transport, because it's a collaborative effort. To make sure that their safety is what we are wanting to make sure it happens, but we want them to also take that responsibility. And people must use public transport. Traffic, climate change is a big problem now. You know what that does. Yes.
All right. All right. And in closing, Sipho, when ama passengers, what would you advise them? Like, what are some of the most interesting things around this sex? I'm sure abantu are excited to go see Timela, they are back online, Sebeya Traveler, and it's much, much cheaper as well. Very quickly.
Thank you, Sisindlandla. Kakhulukazi sinqo sabantu ukuthi bafike ngesikhathi ey'teshini zethu. It's advisable ukuthi at least 1 hour 30 minutes they should be at the station. Bazokwazi ukuthi ba-check in luggage yabo, ba-check amathikithi wabo, ba-check ukuthi esitimeleni iliphi i-carriage noma i-coach abazohlala kulona. But siyabacela-ke ukuthi nase bafikile lapho ey'teshi lezo ezinkulu ezinjengabo Johannesburg, bazinakekele, bayenze sure ukuthi bagada imithwalo yabo, because isikhathi esibhizi lesi esingena kuso. Yes. So siyabanxusa ukuthi sicela nje ukuthi bazigade babe safe at all times.
All right. Wishing you a rest of a festive season and a rest of a festive season emnandi, ladies and gentlemen. That was also Rebecca Phala. She's from the Taxi Council SANTACO, alongside insizwa Sipho Zwane osjoyine nje ekugcineni uvela lapha ePRASA with some very good news. We also had intokazi Dikeledi Walstroom ovela Intercity Xpress. Siyabonga ke mbukeli ukuthi wena uhlale nathi wasibheka wasupported throughout this whole episode. Sithembe mbukeli ukuthi you've taken and heeded the advice ebesinikeza yona ukuthi be vigilant, nani be proactive ekutheni i-travel yakho kumele wenze sure ukuthi you also take responsibility for your own safety. Ni report anything oyibona umbone ngathi uyantenga udriver phone umajali uthi umthanda nonke emakhaya nisale kahle.
Yilungelo Lakho.